Hi, I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer from Orthogonal. We're here at the Javits Center for the MD&M East conference. Our goal here is to bring you the best of what's going on at this conference to you back at your office or your desk, because you can't make it to every conference. And even if you can't necessarily talk to every interesting person at the conference. So I'm thrilled today we have John Crombie from UpStart Product Development. Usually I'll have like one or two questions I would have asked somebody, that we'll focus in on for a several-minute interview. But in this case, John's had such a fascinating career. I think we're just going to let him riff for a bit and give some background on him and what he does. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, or a lot about yourself in your case? You've had quite the career.
Absolutely. So I'm a mechanical engineer working in biomed. My first job was in orthopedics. And then I quickly jumped down a lot of specialties because I just enjoyed different aspects of the engineering. I worked Johnson & Johnson, worked Pfizer, and then recently I started my own company. And the reason I did that is because I had such success with inventions and patents. And I realized that, I had a talent for that. So my goal early on was to actually start my own company and be independent.
All right. So what does your company do?
UpStart Product Development. I develop medical products end to end, but also sports medicine. And I go in there and I start with user immersion, learning about that. I go through risk management, design controls, design, transfer to manufacturing. I go through a whole process, even getting to the end of looking at kind of launch planning, commercialization. So I've tried to incorporate the end-to-end skills within myself. So eventually, when I started my own company, I could do that. I learned all this basically from these corporate companies and a couple startups I worked at.
Interesting. All right. So tell us about one of your favorite creations you've worked on, and maybe a little bit someone that gives us sort of a history of how, all these different aspects.
Actually, I have it in my pocket, which is very interesting.
All right.
So I actually was working for a company, Medical, which is Stryker purchased. And 3 years into the industry, I was brought on board to develop a device for craniofacial deformities in children. And I was working with a top surgeon at NYU, and every element of that led to success. First of all, I came to NYU for that project. Very early in my career, I was on the staff meeting agenda every week. Looked at what they needed, what they were trying to do. They were trying to make lengthening device for the mandible. We did animal studies. I was there, front row seat for everything they did. I worked on designs and prototypes. I would go there and testing. I actually went to procedures, did all of that, came up with the device, and the result after about a year and a half was this Stryker device, because Stryker purchased us.
Okay.
Multi-guide mandibular lengthener. That is for children. It's for lengthening and recontouring their faces of facial deformities. This device was launched in '97.
Okay.
In 2018, it hit $1 billion of sales. Nuts, bolts, screws, and spring. 2018, now it's about $1.25 billion in sales. And that simple device, that was my PhD in product development.
Wow.
So that device showed me the potential of taking very simple parts, applying them to the right procedure with the right clinicians. And this kind of started me thinking that simple, effective engineering is what I need to do, with all the checkpoints of risk management, FDA, marketing, customer satisfaction, patient awareness. And that was all incorporated into a device like this, which is why it's still the standard of care today.
Wow. It's amazing. You look at it and you think, oh, there's some stuff there, but you don't realize necessarily, unless you're in this industry, how much thinking goes into every aspect of this, right?
Yep.
So tell us about some of the stuff you're working on right now.
All right. Well, right now, a couple of things. I'm actually working on some sports medicine devices because I left Johnson & Johnson, started my own company. And, my advice was, hey, you know what? You can kind of not do heavy-duty FDA with sports medicine over the counter. So actually, I started a company, Centaur Sports Medicine, where I'm working on some rehab and sports products, because I was a lifelong athlete, elite athlete, actually. So I'm doing that. And what's interesting, as I develop my own products and ideas, I needed investors.
Okay.
So I took 3 years just going to investor meetings and conferences, meeting investors, learning what they want, going to pitch events, learning how to make business plans and all that. So now my business went from design and development. It's now actually connecting investors to opportunities as I develop them.
Okay.
So now I have a network of that. And I have a company, Innovest, which is now actively pursuing relationships with entrepreneurs, inventors, helping them along the path, and then connecting them to investors.
So it's sort of full service support on all the things. They have an idea, but everything else that makes up MedTech.
Yes, there's so much. Actually, I would say the idea is the easy part,
Okay.
and the rest of it comes.
So you've got your ear to the ground with the investor world. What are you seeing right now in late Q2 2025?
I'll tell you what's interesting is right before a couple of years ago, I would go to these meetings and somebody would be pitching and the investor would say, does it use data? Does it have AI? Does it have sensors? And it's to the point of everything needs to have digital health incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went to AAOS meeting a month ago, which is the orthopedic meeting, large. Every booth had electronics in it. Every booth had software. No matter what they were making, it might be a hammer. It tells you the blow force. So it's very interesting. So I would say if you are not incorporating digital health into your products, you're not going to get much interest.
Okay. And that is because
I'll tell you why.
That's what the investors want to see.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Because it's inexpensive. Sensors are now inexpensive. Batteries are inexpensive, at least relatively, for the value you get. And I saw this one product, and I said, why do you have sensors in this? And they said to collect data. And I said, what are you going to do with the data? And we said, we don't know, but we can provide it to the physician as a value, which means charge them for it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Any particular things in the industry you think people should keep an eye on right now?
Yes, along those lines, I think anyone in the industry, our job's changing from just making what's valuable to the customer to making what's valuable to a larger customer, to the hospital system. So that's where the data comes in, AI comes in, practice management. I think almost every company is thinking way too small, right? When I see robotics for orthopedics and knees, but nothing's integrated across companies with hospitals. Everybody has their own system. So that's coming. I think the talent of today needs to be more of an integration manager than an actual hands-on in-the-depth engineer.
Interesting. So bigger picture.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to have a bigger picture because those little jobs are just going to get swallowed up and not as important as the big picture jobs.
That's interesting because that answer was the same one we got in a completely different interview in a completely different context, which you need to think about the bigger picture in MedTech. And
absolutely. I think systems engineering with data management is what MedTech jobs are going to be.
Very interesting. Well, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us here on
Thank you.
MedTech Spotlight Live. And thank you all for joining us and listening.
Appreciate it. Thanks.